I'm doing a talk on backend-less development with AngularJS. It'll mostly be a talk about backend-less development and why you probably should do that inside, I guess, the new internet age that we live in. The AngularJS is, I guess, an afterthought almost. So I'm Kalon Hinds. I write code at CloudSpace. That's my contact information if you feel the need to contact me. So the internet of old. The old internet was just a server that your application was written on, and the only real access point was a browser. However, the new internet looks a little bit more like this. So we have our server that holds all of our data, basically, and various devices that can connect and try and look at your data and do things. So here at CloudSpace, CloudSpace has been around for a very long time, and we've seen a lot of different trends inside of the web. And here's our solution for writing pretty scalable applications inside of this new internet age. And it's called split stack development. So the idea is that on the server, you just write a pretty solid API that is usable by all of your different devices, and you create front ends on all of the devices inside of their native code. So if you're writing an Android application, you would write that in Java and do your Android stuff, and it will interact with the exact same data that your desktop application would interact with. So is the screen flickering?
It is.
Okay, I think, hold on. There we go. All right, so developing inside this split stack environment has a couple side effects that I've seen inside of a small, working inside of small teams. It trends towards a specialization type of environment versus a generalization one. Normally, you would write your application from doing backend stuff, and you would also do the front end stuff too. However, inside of the split stack idea, we split the teams, and you have front end developers and back end developers, and that kind of forms teams. The issue with this is that practical knowledge of doing back end stuff, if you're on the front end team, it's connected. The screen's flickering. Okay, I think we're good. So side effects of this is that if you are on the front end team, like myself and Nick, as projects get larger and you write front end things more, you start to not keep up with the back end trends as much because you're not writing them on a day-to-day basis. So over time, development will slow because not everyone is exposed to all the different moving parts of the application. You might have to wait for someone who is working on a different part of the application to get things done. And my solution for this is a thing called backend-less development. So the idea is that you build your front end without an underlying back end. Basically, you talk to the people that are building the API, and you come up with the specifications for the different endpoints that you're dealing with, and you get those kind of squared away, and you generate dynamic data using those requirements, and you have an underlying API stub that you can call that will serve that data to you. You might be wondering why yeah, it's distracting. You might be wondering why the responsive API stub is important, and I will get into that. So you don't want to mock things on the front end in the context of web applications like this. You don't want to have like this static view of your UL, which should be dynamic, that lists a bunch of emails. This would only be good for doing design work, specifying CSS stuff. It's not very good for interactivity, just defining that inside of the JavaScript. One solution to that would be to, on your JavaScript layer, have some kind of static construct that represents your data. The problem with this is that you're not able to accurately develop your app to account for API calls, which is mostly what you're doing when you're dealing with data that lives inside of another space. So I will kind of show you how you're able to do this a better way. So here's an example. It's called Simple Email Inbox. Users inside this example are able to read emails. They can select emails for bulk actions, such as deleting emails and marking emails as read. Emails must be marked as read after opening. Emails must also be removed from the inbox after deletion. And emails must indicate a read or unread status when you view them. And here's the email object that we'll be dealing with. So it has an ID, it has a subject line, it has a from that also encapsulates a name and an address. It has a to-line, content, status, a sent on date, and a last viewed on. So I will show you what that example looks like. Or actually, that's not. All right. All right, so here's the simple email box. You're able to select an email, and it will pop up with this view that has all the information about what an email is. It has all the from to whatever. When you're done, it will make it not bold since you've read it. These are all dynamically generated, and I will show you what that looks like on the Angular layer. Actually, I'll also show you the interactivity between like deleting emails or marking emails as read as well, since we'll be going over that. All right. Can you guys see okay? Or can everyone see the code good? All right. So, huh? A little bit bigger? Yeah, that's not what I wanted. Better? Okay. So I'll show you the HTML for it first. So here's our HTML, normal stuff. You declare your Angular app here. It's called a Backend-less app. There's a container div that has a Backend-less app controller. I will actually be going over that since it's kind of important to a lot of stuff, and it kind of didn't. So there is the header that says simple email inbox. There's a button here. That is the delete button, and then there's also a button here that is the mark as read button. And there's your inbox, which is here. And these are all the dependencies that I need for the example. So as Nick mentioned earlier, this is how you specify an Angular module. So the important bit is that to initialize an Angular module, you have to put these brackets here. Once the Angular module has been instantiated, you can refer to it and load more information into it by just doing angular.module and then the name of your module. Normally, these would all be in certain parts of this would be inside of separate files. I'll go over which files would house these moving parts. So these are constants that are necessary to kind of structure the control flow of your application. Normally, these would be built with a build script. You would launch your app locally by saying something like start app in development mode with generating 50 emails. So that's basically what this is. Yes. So this block right here, Angular has a config block that you're able to put arbitrary configuration information about your application inside of there. The important part for us is this provider decorator bit. We'll be using the Angular end-to-end library to kind of augment what HTTP backend does. That is a dependency, or I don't. Decorator? No. Sorry. A module. It is a module that comes inside the Angular standard library, HTTP backend. to help with unit testing. And we'll be augmenting it with the end-to-end version of that to pretend that we're actually calling an API in our application. This bit right here, run, is actually run after everything is loaded. You can think of it as your main function for an Angular module. So inside of here, once all of the controllers and the constants and the configuration is done, it will look at the environment variable and see if it's equal to development. And if it is, it will mock out these API responses. So /API/emails will generate however many emails inside of the mail count there are. When you do a delete request on /API/emails and then some ID number, it will return a 200 response that says that an item has been removed. And this bit right here, when you do a put request, which we'll use for updating emails on our pretend server, it will modify the last viewed on date of that email. So in order to generate our fake email list, we'll be using something called Angular services. Services are a way for you to maintain a type of state between your different Angular controllers. Inside of our example, we'll only be using one controller, and that's where most of our application actually lives. So you can add a service to your module by doing the module call and then .service, and then you have your service name. Oh man, you have your service name DataFaker. So this service is called DataFaker, and it has a function called generate emails, which has a count, and it goes about generating these emails using a library called Faker that just generates random words that are associated to things. So in this case, there's faker.company catchphrase, and that returns you a nifty catchphrase so that you don't have just random noise inside your application when you're developing. Kind of makes fake data that looks like actual data so that you can see what your application looks like, or what it might look like if you had real data inside of it. And at the end of that, after the emails are generated, it sorts them and then it returns them when that function is called. So that is all the underlying work to kind of get the data faking and API faking to work for you. And the important bit is this controller. So the controller is what you would normally write as your application. This is what's being shipped to the client. People will be interacting with this. And by stubbing and generating fake data, you're able to write this and not have to change it when you're ready to launch your application. So this first bit is, or actually, I'll go over the controller part. So Backend-less app controller specifies that this is the controller that the code, this view up here that I showed you earlier, will be looking at. We'll be looking at. If I were to define a controller underneath this, it would not look at the controller that I'm going to show you in a second. It will look at whatever controller you define for that chunk of code. So this is an array, or associative array, that tracks the emails that you've selected. So in that selection box, these guys, every time that you click one of these, it updates that selection list to have these emails inside of them. This is the function that's run to actually toggle the selection. So when you click the select button, and it will check to see whether the current email that you've selected or deselected is inside the list. And if it's inside the list of selected emails, then it will remove it. If it's not inside the list of selected emails, it will add it to that list. When you click the button for mark as read, it will run this function, which is read selected, and it will just update the the status to read on all the emails that are selected. And this function is the actual read function that does the reading. So if you click on an email, it does that dialog box bit, and that's this block right here. And underneath that, it changes the status of the email to be read. And the idea is that you will post that email to the server saying, you'll put it to the server saying that, hey, this email has updated. And when you have gotten a response back, it will send you an updated email from the server. So the server will go off and do whatever it needs to do and send you an updated email. And that is what this bit right here does. So when you when you put to this URL, it will get the data, pretend that it's the actual server. It will update the last viewed on date, and then it will return to you your updated email so that you can actually use it inside your application. If we were not inside of development mode, it would look to an actual external URL for that, like an actual API server, and it will assume that it will do the same exact functionality that you have stubbed here. So that is essentially that. This is just deleting things. It's pretty much the same as reading, except instead of showing you the email, it actually just removes it from the list of emails that you saw. The cool bit about this is that if whoever's working on your API is done with the API, you can just deploy your app outside of development mode, and you don't have to change any of the actual application code. It will just work because you've developed against a stubbed API. So that is essentially the talk.